What is money? Parents always accuse their children of thinking that it grows on trees. Communists and liberals are always saying that it is what businessmen have too much of. Whatever it is, we all know that our government spends way too much of it. Yet we also know that we don't have to worry about it anymore because we can just put it on our credit card. In order to comprehend it fully, we need to go back in history. Not that far back. To the time when money wasn't really invented yet, before the advent of the dollar or even gold or silver coins. If a farmer wanted a goat, he had to take some of his wheat to the local goat herder and trade him a few baskets of wheat for a goat. But what would happen if the goat herder didn't want wheat? Instead, he wants a new cloak. Now the farmer has to go to the local weaver, give him the wheat for a cloak, and then take that cloak to the goat herder. But what if the weaver didn't want wheat either? The only person who did want wheat only had chickens. Now the farmer had to find someone who wanted chickens, but had something to trade that the weaver would take. Eventually, the local society all began to recognize that there are some goods that everyone was willing to trade for eventually. People were willing to trade for these items because they knew that they could always trade it into someone else. Everyone will need some form of food eventually. So if you're a local trader, it is a safe investment to trade for food. What happens though if there is a very plentiful harvest and no one wants any more food for several months? The trader's stockpile rots in the barn and he loses all of that wealth. The next time the trader makes a deal for something that he thinks other people will need, he is only going to trade for something that won't rot. This is called durability. How about dirt? Everyone needs it to walk on, build a house, or any other of those things. Best of all, it doesn't rot away. This is obviously very impractical because there's too much of it. Anyone could just go and fill a bag with dirt to trade with you. It's not scarce. Of course, if they gave you a lot, enough to build a house on, that would work, but could you imagine them trying to bring all of that to the marketplace? This is called portability. Not only did it need to be something that everyone would eventually need or use, and have to be something that wouldn't rot, it also had to be something small enough that people could carry it to the market. Even though it had to be small enough to carry the market, it also needed to be valuable enough to use to trade for a house. In addition, it needed to be something that everyone could recognize as valuable. It needed to have recognizability. Yes, I know that isn't a word, but it should be. Now I know that you are thinking, women could be money. They meet all of the requirements. They are very durable. I hear they're living around 80 years these days. They're scarce. There are only about 3.5 billion of them total, so they are in somewhat limited supply. And they're very portable. They even come perfectly capable of transporting themselves. They're also very easy to recognize. And I'm sure you all know the obvious reasons this wouldn't work. They are not divisible. Pat yourself on the back because I know that's what the answer you gave. Think about it. If I was going to trade for something worth 2.5 women, how would I make change? All transactions would have to be in values equal to whole women. This is the fifth and last criteria for money, and it's called divisibility. So, money needed to be something everybody recognized and was willing to trade for. We call this recognizability. It had to last a long time. We call this durability, sometimes also called a store of value. It had to be able to be moved to the marketplace. We call this portability. It had to be something that didn't exist everywhere. We call this scarcity. And you have to be able to make change. We call this divisibility. It used to be that it had to be useful in and of itself, not just because the government says so. But we'll cover this later in the course. Because of these 5 conditions, most societies chose precious metals like gold and silver. Now the farmer would sell his wheat for gold and silver coins. Then take those coins to the goat herder and buy a goat. The goat herder could then go back to the weaver and buy a cloak with the coins. The weaver could buy what he wanted, and so on and so forth. It is important to remember, though, that ultimately the money was a commodity of its own, but it was being used to represent other commodities or labor. When the farmer sold his wheat and got coins, those coins took the place of his wheat. This concept is very applicable in modern times because many of us are hourly workers. This means that when a teenager spends $40 on a pair of shoes, he is not just spending a piece of paper. He is giving 4 hours of his labor. That is, if he gets paid 10 an hour. If he gets less an hour, he's spending even more. Next time you buy something, I want you to think about what it is that you are really trading. This concept of trading a commodity becomes very useful to see the issue clearly when people claim that if you work hard, you should be paid a lot of money. You may have heard it said that people deserve a fair wage. Let me tell you a story about my childhood. First, remember this formula. MMW equals HE plus NR times T. Okay, back to the story. Once there was an old tree on my grandfather's property that needed to be chopped down before it fell on someone. My grandfather, brother, and I went out with our chainsaws and cut it down and then chopped it into little pieces. When we loaded it into a truck and took it to a town about 30 miles south and sold it as firewood for about $400. We each got about $130 for 7 hours of labor, or roughly about $20 per hour. Now, if it only took 7 hours because we used my grandfather's chainsaws and truck, if we had had axes, it would have taken us much, much longer. By truck, it only took us about 30 minutes to deliver the wood, but if we had to carry it, by hand, it would have taken weeks. We were able to earn $20 an hour because of the tools we used. Those tools, though representing my grandfather's past labor, because he had worked and given the fruit of his labor to buy those tools. So because we used not only our own labor, but also applied past labor, which had been stored in the tools, we got a lot done. If I had been in a third world country, and I didn't have those tools, I still would have done the same amount of work, but it would have taken me weeks, and so I would have gotten about $1 a day. Many people think that it is unfair that I got $20 an hour, but the guy in the third world only got $1 a day. But remember, we really get paid the same. That is $400 total. The difference is that I used the stored work of my grandfather wisely and efficiently, and in a sense worked harder, because in 1 hour I did as much as the other man did in 20 days. And that 1 hour I worked, many of my grandfather's past hours also worked. This also applies to groups of people in our own country. Many say that doctors earn too much money. What you need to remember is that they worked hard in high school, college, medical school, and residency. Whenever they look at someone's broken leg, they are applying all the knowledge that they learned in those many years of training to multiply the work they are doing in a few minutes that they examine you. Do you remember that formula? MMW equals HE plus NR times T. What it means is man's material welfare equals human energy plus natural resources times tools. So my material welfare, the money I get, equals my human energy, which is 7 hours of work, plus the natural resources, the tree times tools, the chainsaws and truck. Throughout the rest of this class, we're going to show you, young learner, how to use your money wisely so that you can make it multiply your work like a tool does, so that you can be more efficient, more productive, and hopefully wealthier. Thanks for watching this slideshow. Now watch it again and make sure you remember it all, because I will probably give you a quiz on it later.